Well, many kids insist that they study better when doing multiple things at once. They are texting, they are watching TV, they're listening to music, and they're probably checking Facebook all at the same time while they're trying to study. But research shows that multitasking in this way is not always the best way to learn. Here to talk about how you can help your kids put down those gadgets and get focused is our learning expert, Ann Dolin. Hi, Ann. Good to see you.
Thank you.
So, of course, they're doing all that because they're watching us do all that, right? We're multitaskers, too.
We are, and we're just as guilty, that's for sure. But certainly there is a myth of multitasking. And what we do know from the research is that when you multitask, you really don't focus on a lot of things at one time. What the brain does is switches from one thing to another very quickly. So it's just that these kids, when they, for example, are listening to their iPod, they're texting their friends, they have Facebook on their computer, and they have a book on their lap, and they say they're studying, they're really flittering between a lot of things. They're not doing all of those things at once. And what we do know is that the research says you cannot really pay attention to all those things. So the best thing to do is to focus on one thing.
Okay.
But are our kids going to do that?
Well, you know, some kids find that just when they're placed in a quiet room, it's like too quiet.
Right. Yes.
And it's also distracting because because they're used to all the noise.
Yeah. There's two types of kids. You do have the kids that do well in a quiet place, and they kind of naturally gravitate to a quiet area in the house to do homework, and they're not the type of kids that listen to their iPod or text at the same time. But then you have the other type of child that does like the hum of a busy area, that does need music, or they say that when they have their phone, they're just a little bit more alert, and there is something to it. But what we do know is that those types of kids do better when they have maybe a 20-minute study time and then a tech break for about 5 minutes. That's kind of a happy medium because they're not going to put it all away, that's for sure.
Well, that's a great idea because if they do a little bit of studying, then they kind of get this payoff. It's like a little carrot that you're dangling. Oh, you get a tech break in 5 more minutes. Just go 5 more minutes and you can make a cell phone call or you can text somebody.
The other question that parents often ask about is music. Does music help learning? Because, you know, we've heard lots of different things that it does help learning. And now what we know is that music does help learning actually when the task is rote. For example, you know, you have a student who's copying spelling words or they're rewriting a draft of an essay. When the task is mundane, music does help to make you a little bit more alert and a little bit more aroused, and you're much more able to pay attention. But for long-term retention on tests, music is not helpful, and it has found to have a negative impact when kids study using music as opposed to when they do not.
So when you have to use those critical thinking skills or creative skills. Coming up with your own essay as opposed to copying one.
Right.
Okay. Does it matter what kind of music may play in the background? I mean, should it be kind of, you know, soothing music, your parents' music, or can it be something the kids like?
Well, it's a mixed bag, really. What we do know is that the best type of music for learning is classical or instrumental or familiar lyrics, familiar music. But when kids are listening to the words in a song and they're trying to memorize those words, or they're paying more attention to the lyrics, that in itself is distracting and is not helpful to learning. But it's so hard to regulate that, quite honestly, with your kids. So what I often tell parents is there are certain limits that you want to set, and there's some things that you want to let go. For example, you know, things that you might want to set boundaries around are definitely the TV. You know, having that off during homework is important, and it's also important to have video games off during homework. Those are a reward, but you don't want to say when you're done with your work, you can watch TV or play video games because they're going to be done with their homework in 10 minutes. A better way is saying after 7 o'clock you can have TV or video games. But other things, you know,
and maybe like you can have 1 hour of TV, or you know, limit the amount of TV that they can watch.
Definitely limit it. You know, things like just the basic texting on cell phones or listening to music, those are harder to enforce. So I often tell parents, if you have a pretty good kid that it's not really impacting them too much, just let them have it.
And you brought a laptop, and those are used as educational tools. Everybody has to have a computer, right?
Yes.
But the kids could be, you know, they could be talking to their friends, right? They could be doing some email on there. How do you regulate something like that?
It's very tough. I won't lie to you. You know, that's definitely a dilemma for parents. But if you have a child who's, again, pretty responsible, I would let it go. But if you have a student who should be doing homework for an hour and they're doing homework for 4 hours because they're surfing the internet, you have to put limits on it. And what you want to do is say to your child, okay, print out all the things you need from the internet, close your laptop, and you can go back to it later on. But when they have free reign and they're kind of abusing their privilege, then it's not a good thing.
Is your cell phone going off over here? I think something's buzzing.
You're right.
Interruptions. Now, say that your child is up in their room quietly studying, or so you think.
Right.
But you know, most kids have a TV in their room, and they have a cell phone, they have all these. How can you regulate that when you're not there every minute of their studying period?
You can't.
Is it better to put them in the kitchen where you are and keep an eye on them?
It depends on the age of the child. You know, again, if they're doing fairly well in their room, that's fine. But many kids don't do homework well in their room, and they do it better in a place where the parent or there's just a little bit more accountability. You can check in. So I love the dining room. I think the dining room's a great place, the home office. But actually, studies show that when kids do homework in different locations every day, it actually increases their retention of information. So
that's odd, isn't it?
It's interesting. So I don't think there has to be a fixed place for homework, but if your child is not successful in his room, you got to change gears.
Oh, there are some kids that really aren't too successful anywhere you put them in because they are just so not focused. They can't seem to focus. What do you do with a child like that?
Well, for those kids, there are a lot of things, but definitely you have to have a good homework area for them, and you have to have shorter periods of time. Sometimes kids will be able to focus for 20 minutes, but give them 2 hours to do their homework, and they're not going to get anything done. The best thing to do is to use a timer, encourage them to use a timer on their phone. Everybody has one, like a stopwatch, and they put the timer on for 20 minutes, they study as hard as they can, and then they can take a break. That's often a lot more productive than just sitting there for hours.
Easier for them to digest smaller amounts of time, too.
Exactly.
Well, that's a great idea. And then, you got the other kids that are like up all night using their computers. That's hard to regulate for a parent, too. And then they're sleep deprived the next day.
They are. And so I did bring a charger to show you that, kids don't have to have all these things in their rooms. And the excuse for many kids is, oh, but Mom, I have to charge my phone. And they have the charger conveniently next to their bed, and they're up till midnight texting and checking their Facebook. But I often recommend that parents put the chargers outside the door of their room, so you have the policy in your house that everything has to be out and be charging by 10 p.m., say. And that's something that you can check. And that would be a limit that you put on technology to really avoid those late night Facebook accounts going wild.
It sounds like you've seen all the tricks and have figured out the kids. Ann Dolin, thanks so much for coming in. Homework Made Simple is your book. Thanks so much for dropping by with some great tips for parents and keeping their kids focused on their homework. And up next here on Let's Talk Live, a paralyzed man learns he gets an incredible gift. We're going to have his inspiring story for you just next. And why the city of Newark, New Jersey is having to pay for some of Whitney Houston's funeral expenses. We'll have those details as well. And if you have something to say, tweet us, send it to Let's Talk Live DC. We'd love to hear from you.